So one thing that people get confused with me is it's really hard to describe a bent circle metal piece that's bent in the wrong way, that's supposed to be bent in the wrong way, that's not a washer that goes to a table. Now, is that hard to describe? Of course it is. But what am I talking about? I put a table together. Now there's a nut, there's the bolt, there's a washer, but then there's supposed to be a crooked washer. Usually with it doesn't line up perfect, so that way it goes crooked and keeps the threads from pushing out. It keeps the table from breaking. I put 100 tables together. These spacers were not doing what they were supposed to. I put them on the table and the legs are popping off. Just popping off. Now the table was junk the way they built it on the outside on the joint. But also the bolts and the spacers did not do the trick. Every month I was having to tighten those legs. Every fucking month for my roommate. It had the washer, it had the bolt, it had the nut, and it had the other little spacer that was crooked. But it was bent crooked in the wrong way, and which was making it worse. Some of them were even flat. Yes, some of the spacers that are supposed to be crooked in just the right way to keep it from going out were either flat or not crooked enough or too crooked or they just weren't made even. There was just a big bag of scrap metal basically. I've never seen as ununiform as these. It was really bad. I think this was sent pieces from China, maybe partly assembled in Taiwan or disassembled in Taiwan and then sent over. Maybe it was all Taiwan, but it had some Chinese information and it also had some Taiwanese information, like assembled in Taiwan, disassembled in Taiwan, designed in China, just stuff like that, a little mixture of both and a little bit of US at the end, like a seller in the US, like I think it was Fingerhut through an IKEA or one of those type of things, assemble it yourself. But the pieces, for one, they didn't drill out a hole. One of the legs had no drill out hole for the support bolt. Yes, you heard me right. It's not, it's literally the whole leg is on the outside of the table with no joints to really help keep the weight. And only thing taking the weight is a bolt in the middle of two flimsy pieces of wood that could easily crack from the weight that this thing is supposed to take. Horrible design, horrible table, and whatever factory drilled it out, they missed a hole. Just like there was a glass table where they missed a hole as well. Where that's not something you want them to miss a hole in. A glass table. I made it work though. I didn't have to drill the glass, thank God. That's held in by spacers that go inward, so but you still need the wood to hold. So I had to drill my own hole in the wood in the glass frame, and I had to drill my own hole in the frickin' table where the other three holes are. Three legs have a hole and attachment. One leg does not. So I just copied the other three legs. Oh, and like I said, their spacers were junk. But I describe them as bent sideways, and I should say some of them are bent almost flat. And I have washers, so we don't need any flat spacers. We got washers for that. Just the whole thing was that the leg would come apart. They're just not built right. So I wasn't able to use those. Not using any of them gave me 6 months to a year, sometimes 2 years before the leg started to wiggle. What was better than the 30 to 60 days I was getting with these junky spacers. What usually do the trick, but these ones did not. Even though some of them look crooked enough, they just weren't working. And see, that's a hard situation to describe to somebody who wasn't there and didn't look at the bag of crap. I know that the spacers are supposed to be crooked in the right way to try to stop the table from coming apart, but if they're not doing their job because they're not crooked in the right way and some of them are flat and it's just causing a space for the bolt to go and loosen even quicker, that's a problem. Because they're supposed to make a sideways kind of space for the bolt to hold in there and not lose its threading. But the opposite was tending to happen with these, and they were not uniform, which tells you what you need to know. I guess they didn't get the bending process right. I have no idea why they would set this up in this way, but hey, they didn't even drill out the hole, so what do you expect? And the legs, if you see this box joint on the outside or whatever you want to call it, it's just the only way you could possibly help this table take weight is from maybe putting a nail on the top too. But this only has literally one rod taking the weight. You got a bolt and a rod taking all this weight, holding on a small space of wood. So you have all that pressure on just a small space of wood. You couldn't make like a 3-point pressure with this leg. Instead, they have it attached in the most awkward, horrible way, and missing a hole and shitty spacers. But when I say they're crooked spacers, but then they're not crooked spacers, you might get confused until you get some of the context. And that's where people lose track. And it's hard for me. I'm not Mr. Pull the string and get your answer. I don't like to be having to always have the answer for everybody, but I know the truth. I know what real life has happened. I know our Trump, who wants to be president, definitely is a spoiled brat who aged poorly, and he's into himself, or he just isn't that knowledgeable, really. You can see it in his decisions that he makes, the choices and decisions that Trump continues to make, tells you the type of man he is. When a person shows you who they are, believe them. And showing is different than hearing. When you hear a rumor, but you see a man fall, see, if you hear a man is faking falls, but then you see a fall, you'll know it's real. You can tell when something is real at times, when it repeats over and over, when somebody wants something themselves, but they can't get it. It becomes obvious when somebody wants something badly, but they can't get it because of something like a disability. Then it gets real for everybody in the room real quick. Because then the person who wants to drive, the person who wants to walk, the person who wants to make money, the person that obviously loves, working at certain jobs, that person, he doesn't get what he needs. Why? Because other people like to just, I guess, pick fun in a hurtful way that does damage permanently to another person's lives. A lot of rich people do this. They think it's a game for them, that destroying other people's lives with their words and making up fantasies and stories about people based on little evidence at all, based on little to no evidence at all, that would be enough to let this, throw the ball over to you, and you take a story, and then you throw a ball, and then you add on some details, and you all just keep on self-confirming. You're just reinforcing each other's ideas because that makes you all feel better. But instead, you've left the person that had first-person witness out of it. So you're all people who weren't witnesses. So you got to think of this like this. Who was there at the time? Who was there at the time to really know what happened? That is the key information. Then you speak to the people who were there. And if there's only one person left who was there, it's a good idea to get context from that person to get understanding. But people don't do that. They jump to conclusions, allowing themselves to fool themselves and others, causing damage, untold damage, and people die every year from these type of decisions. Some misunderstanding happens in the shelter, he gets thrown out in the cold, he dies of exposure. And then you find out later it was just a misunderstanding. That person wasn't the problem, the other person was the problem, but they both got thrown out. Rules like that and things like that. During winter now, they open up emergency protocols in some places, but like Rochester, they barely have any, they don't have any in Rochester. There's one in Somersworth with some emergency protocols, but they're always overflowing, and they will turn you away if you don't get there in time. So there's a lot of stuff like that where you are more than happy to freeze to death if you don't have a watch on you or if you don't have a car. Things like that can always come up. Remember that. People die of exposure every year over stupid shit.